Well, the first book is dreadful. It's so out of date. 1987.
Did you read that one? Not yet.
It's just so out of date.
Sorry.
All right. What is today, 11th? Call the May 11th meeting of the Planning Commission order. Roll call, please.
Here.
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 Delayed there for a minute.
Here.
Here.
All right. Minutes. I'll entertain a motion or
To approve the April 13 minutes, 2015, of the Haymarket Planning Commission.
I second your motion.
discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passes unanimously. Citizens' time. I'll invite any citizen here to approach with anything they wish to address the Planning Commission with. I think you can put that back. And seeing none, we'll close citizens' time. Public hearings. These are the two we scheduled last month, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The first is the St. Paul School Special Use Permit, which Dr. Evans and Whitrock from the school are here to answer questions. We also have a separate public hearing for the capital improvements program. This has been advertised with the town budget already, but for the purposes of the commission's recommendation, we've included it here as an item for hearing.
Okay, in that case, I will open the public hearing for the St. Paul Special Use Permit application, SUP 20150-331, and invite anyone who wishes to speak on the matter to please come forward.
No. Coke, you can speak during the discussion time, or you can also speak here too, either one. Okay.
Up to
I'll
you.
go ahead and start.
Either one works, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've done this before. I'm Charles Whitrock, everybody calls me Coke.
Everybody calls me Coke. And we just, first of all, you know, our relationship here with St. Paul School, which is in the future after this summer, or during this summer, is going to be called St. Michael's Academy. And we've had a very good relationship, worked well with everybody on the council and the planning commission in the past, and we just ask that we continue that good relationship. As you know, our elementary school, kindergarten through third grade, has moved down to the old Pace West School, QBE, which we leased from them the space, and we'll be growing into that. As I said last year, eventually we'll go through fifth grade. Next year we're going to fourth grade. We're third grade this year. And we'll eventually get to fifth grade. And when we get to fifth grade, it'll be August 2017, we'll be down there 100%. We'll be out of the old parish hall and the modular, and it'll all be down there at that facility. Now, we have put forward the special use permit initially. I forget the exact date, but when we got we're expanding and needed more room to get the modulars, they worked out quite well. And just like the ones that were down there at the old Pace West School, they function quite well for us, and they continue to. And we ask that you basically extend the SUP for another year. What happened, as you'll see on, I can't remember which page it is. I think it's the first page of the issue for the SUP. Right near the bottom, there's a paragraph in italics. And back whenever it was, Mr. Tobias recommended that instead of us having to come here every year and renew or ask for the SUP for another year, that you extended it so that it automatically was approved unless there was a problem. And as I said, in August 2017, we're going to be out of there. So if it were done in that manner again, then we wouldn't have to do this every year. Not that I mind. I don't mean to say it that way. I'm just saying it would be easier for y'all and us both, you know, unless there was a problem, that it's just automatic because we do this every year. That's the only real issue I have. I know that we're kind of in the middle of the town. I don't think we have had any serious problems with any of the residents. I've talked to several of them. We even helped, I forget her name, the lady next door who's there by herself. We've helped her do some gardening work and some other things. And I think we've got a pretty good working relationship with the town, and we'd like to keep it that way. So we're just asking that the supplement, if nothing else, be renewed for another year. Can I answer any questions?
Not yet, I got to close public hearing first.
This is Dr. Catherine Evans. She's the principal of the school. If you would like to ask her. I think they said they're going to close.
If she wishes to address us, that's fine.
Either way.
Either way.
Now, later, either way.
Is there anybody else who wishes to address the planning commission on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Open the public hearing on the capital improvements program. At this point, I would ask anyone who wishes to address the capital improvements program to please step forward. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Announcements, I have none. Ralph? John? No announcements? ARB update, anything?
I think what we're going to go through is this today, and that was pretty much
Council?
so it did.
All right. St. Paul special use permit application, Mr. Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Whitrock walked you through, the original the original intent of, excuse me, at the time that the Episcopal Church, before the split of the church, the intent was to build a permanent school down at St. Paul's, the church property down Fayette Street. And this was always intended as an interim or a temporary condition. With the slow move down to Pace West and the lease agreement being up in 2017, the one issue we've had in the interim has been with parking off-site. There's been some queuing of parents in the Winterham property across the street, some off-street parking north of Payne Lane. There's been occasionally some traffic backups on the Fayette Street that the school has met with the police chief to address. I did meet with Dr. Evans last week. They've changed. Well, let me back up a second. So the point that the permit's been renewed, that's for the trailers and for the elementary school. A lot of the site plan requirements we would otherwise implement or impose were waived because of the temporary nature of it. There was conditions imposed which talk about the number of students that could be served, and there's a copy of those conditions in your packet. And it also came up with a traffic management plan, which did two things. One, it provided off-site parking down at the church parking lot, and also came up with a plan to allow for queuing of parents picking up children to and from the morning sessions and the afternoon sessions and the full-day programs. Obviously, what happened, you can see this a lot with elementary schools. Parents kind of have their own mentality and how they wish to move in and out, especially me being a frazzled parent, today being one of them. You're wanting to get in and out quickly. So while the traffic management plan was in place, it wasn't necessarily always followed. And the school has made some efforts to address the pickup and drop-off situation. Dr. Evans, too, we also spoke about, she does send information to the parents about pickup and drop-off and where they're supposed to queue ahead of time. The property manager of Winterham across the street has been in contact with them, and also the police department to discourage people from queuing across the street. Also on Payne Lane, giving notice about Payne Lane. That's the boarded-up house we call the Colonel's house in those areas. So the only, I guess, stick to keep people from doing that, I think at some point the Winterham property, there's a new ordinance that the police chief is proposing, which would allow the police to ticket folks that would queue or park across the street and walk-off park. And also, too, the same thing with Payne Lane. If people are illegally parking on that property, they will be able to ticket them. In that case, then the fallback plan is they would have to park down at the church parking lot per the traffic management plan. What's happening kind of in tandem is the police chief has looked at on-street parking. Maybe many of you may have seen on the west side of Fayette between Washington Street and the first entrance to Winterham, there's been on-street parking there. And the police chief is coordinating with the town engineer to look at the viability of that. Now, the conditions of the special use permit explicitly state all your parking needs to be off-street. But the chief and others looked at that as a possible traffic calming. Right now, people use Fayette Street as a shortcut from Washington Street down to southbound Jefferson Street and back and forth. And they have seen a noticeable change in speed in terms of narrowing the roadway because of folks parking on the street. But the intent is not to serve solely the school with those on-street spaces. If any of the other folks in town or any other businesses wanted to use that parking on the street, they'd be able to do so. And if it's all full, then again, they would have to the church would have to fall back to the church. So I apologize for the long-winded explanation, but I think, again, we recognize this was intended to be an interim thing. The school continues to revisit the pickup and drop-off and the parking issue. I could talk to Dr. Evans about when this is over or when we get through the permit process, reissuing those notices to the parents of the school, and to the point where they start ticketing. That'll hopefully be the deterrent from parking off-site on other people's private property. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Anybody have any questions for staff?
I believe the verbal request was for 1 year, the application is for 2, and I don't know that the Planning Commission has the ability to do for 2 through 2017.
So the way the ordinance reads is it's on a yearly, they have to apply on a yearly basis. In other special use permits that we've approved
They auto
said the
renewal.
word,
They auto
automatically
renewal.
renew unless there's an issue, and there's quite the extensive language that's in there. But you can certainly make a recommendation to town council on what you feel is appropriate, either for renewing in a year or not to exceed the 2017 date in their materials.
Will you need to have any special parking marks on the street on Winterham to allow those 5 cars? Will that be?
I think the police chief and the engineer is, and this happening concurrently, if that becomes a truly viable option, there may be some discussion about demarcating the spaces. Maybe we'll even go to a metered system at some point. But in the meantime, the minimum standard is 15 feet off Washington Street and 15 feet back from that second entrance. Other than that, it's first come, first served.
Now, in terms of actually going onto the property to do drop-off or pickup, they're supposed to go down Payne Lane and then break left or right onto Fayette Street. Is that correct? Or the opposite?
They come in the parking lot off Payne Lane.
Off Payne Lane? Okay. And so they can approach Payne Lane from any direction?
That's true.
Okay.
When we originally did this, we were, both us and the town were concerned about the traffic coming down Old Carolina. And obviously now that's not an issue. But that was one of the concerns about the tie-up there at that light. And I don't think it became a problem, even when it was open. And now it's much, easier traveling. I will have to admit, I'm sure that there are times when Payne Lane is full of cars and people wait either on Fayette Street or on Old Carolina or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And Dr. Evans has got copies of all the documents she sent to people to say, don't do it. But people are people. We also have told the parents, and we continue to advocate that if it's an issue, individual issue, that the police ticket the people. We've had a similar type problem in the new way we had to work down at QBE, and we've had the police down there on several occasions to make people do it right. Now we don't have speeders going through the parking lot, and most of the traffic problem is not ours. A lot of it is from the recreational stuff from Parks and Rec.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any specific route, because there was
There is a specific route. The specific route is coming in at Payne Lane, either right turn, left turn, into the parking lot, and then doing a kind of a U-turn around the building.
Right, and you helped me clarify a question I had earlier, because I saw cars coming in from Fayette, turning left onto Fayette from Washington, and that was kind of what I was looking at, but you'd answered that question appropriately, so, no, I'm good.
Someone, go ahead.
I had a question about the number of school buses that come down Fayette. Now, first of all, they're not serving St. Paul's.
That is correct. And that was initially when we did this the first time, and I think Mr. Weir can adhere to this because he was there, we did have concern about that being an issue with the school being there. And I think we visited it, as I recall, looked at it, studied it, and it was not a problem. I don't know if it is now. I haven't seen
With cars parking on Fayette Street
it. Oh,
and now a school bus, because they're all going at about the same time, you know, within the time frame of your school's opening. I think there might even be the high school buses. I'm not all that positive. No?
If I can interrupt, so the police chief did go out there and observe. Again, it was more or less a test case, and they did notice that a car parked on the street along with a car traveling southbound and a bus coming northbound, that it was a tight fit. But I think the chief didn't believe it was a safety issue at the time. But again, that on-street parking is not in perpetuity. We're going to continue to figure it out. But more importantly, it's the school will be able to use that on-street parking if it's available, but if not, they'll have to fall back to the church. But didn't feel that the school buses were an issue.
Okay.
Tangential.
Ralph?
Well, no, just tangential to that. I've seen fire engines use Fayette as opposed to Jefferson because a fire engine can't get through that if there's traffic. So if there's going to be on-street parking there, which is fine, just make sure that it goes back far enough that it's not going to interfere with the fire engine. The same thing with a bus. I mean, a bus has got tight in there, but the fire engines are even larger vehicles, so it's just a consideration.
One of the concerns is that the width of Fayette is much wider between Washington and the end of the Winterham property before the church, and then it quickly narrows down. So the police chief was cognizant of that change, and so if they were to make a more permanent on-street, it would only be along certain sections along the street.
As Winterham is developed, is this going to impact the scheduled development calendar, say, for Winterham development and the Colonel's house that's going to be taken down, right? Does that impact time-wise this at all, or is that?
The special use permit?
Yes.
There may be a time where both projects and the school are overlap, both in construction and operation, but again, the traffic plan that's in place would have them fall back to the church parking lot down the street to meet their parking and queuing demands. So.
Anybody else on this end?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just, another thought, with the lower part of Fayette, where it does narrow and becomes curvy there, obviously, there's nobody from that neighborhood who's here to speak against this SUP, so I'm presuming that they're not impacted negatively by the traffic patterns associated with the school.
I could kind of answer that. Again, when we did this the first time, we thought that may be a problem. And there were a couple of people who came to this kind of a forum and discussed it and were concerned. So we watched it for the first couple of years very closely. And I don't know the names of the people, but I have talked to a couple of them, and they don't seem to have any kind of a problem, an issue at all.
Thank you.
It just seems to be an issue with traffic in general, not necessarily specific to the school. It's more people trying to beat the light.
So you're going to be taking, as I understand it, one grade there'll be one grade fewer number of students within another year. Is that right?
No, ma'am.
Oh, I don't understand.
Where we are here, the property we're talking about for the SUP is 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 4-year-olds. It's preschool.
Right.
The other property currently is an elementary school, kindergarten through 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. When we get to the 5th grade in 2017, it'll be completely, everything will be there. We're expanding the property and what we're leasing from QBE such that we'll have the entire school there. And it might be possible that we could move part of the preschool next year, not starting in September, but the following year. It depends on how quickly we work with QBE. Quickly we work with QBE and how much they're able to give us some room.
So really, it's not the traffic plan that's necessarily the issue. It sounds like it's enforcement, just getting people to comply with the plan. It's a viable plan, given the parameters of the town, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think you could go to any school in this county during morning and pick up, and you're going to see traffic issues. The school I teach at, it's a problem every day, getting people in and out. So I really don't see that as being that big a deal. It's school. People should be aware, as long as, like Mr. Ring said, that rescue vehicles can get through. I don't see a problem with it.
Anything further for staff or the applicant? In that case, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to forward SUP 2015-000331 to the town council with a recommendation for approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion?
I do want to note, inside the clause where they requested for a 2-year renewal, given the fact that, the population or density between 134 this year in terms of students and faculty and 132 next year, it's not really going to make that much of a difference. With traffic improvements coming along, especially with the rebuild of the bridge over here, I don't see why we can't just allow an auto renewal to occur in 2016 in June when it comes up.
Technically, I don't think
Is
that's,
that a friendly amendment to the motion for recommendation?
That is a,
it is.
Is there a second to the friendly amendment?
I would second it.
Discussion on the amendment. Roll call vote on the amendment to the principal motion.
aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Yes.
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 Okay. Any further discussion on the now amended principal motion?
Mr. Chairman, the seconder of the original motion agreed to the friendly amendment, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
He made it.
Yeah, it was-
Yes,
yeah.
he was fine with it. The mover of the principal motion was fine with it, yes. Okay, in that case, roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. Proper policies presentation, Mr. Schneider.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You guys are done.
We'll let you know about the council scheduling and here. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just lost my train of thought. So I've described to you several times that we had hired on-call planning services. The Berkeley Group is a group that has been hired to look at our ordinances. They've done a diagnostic on our comprehensive plan, our subdivision ordinances and the like. One of the projects we asked them to look at was our proffer policies. Did most of you go to the recent commission training? Yeah, okay.
It was good.
Okay, so most of you that are familiar with, sounding unprofessional for a minute, but it's the state's legal extortion system, or the proffer policies. And basically, the idea is that, yeah, exactly, it's voluntary. But the idea is to mitigate or offset the impact of additional residential development or commercial development and the like. Most jurisdictions typically apply proffer policies to residential development. And they are intended to address a number of public facilities that may be necessary to, again, support additional densities provided by rezoning. So there's a lot that has happened at the state level and the federal level with regards to proffers. So Drew and Darren have put together a proffer policy for the council to adopt. We have 2 rezonings right now, one for Robinson's Paradise, north of 66. They have a by right subdivision, about 16 units. They want to rezone to approximately 26 units, single family, small lot, single family. The Fairgrounds property that I've mentioned several times, and the owner's representative is here this evening. They're proposing to convert commercial land and develop townhomes as a part of that project. So in both instances, these proffer policies would apply to those projects. Previously, the council had adopted kind of a standard one-form policy, and I believe I included it in the packet. It allocated monies for the museum, for the police department, for schools, for other types of things. This is a more robust recommendation and policy for the council to adopt. And without further ado, Darren and Drew are here this evening to present the policy. It will be for your review and recommendation. We would suggest you have a public hearing at the point you feel comfortable with the document. Any recommendations that you have this evening, the consensus of the commission, we can ask them to amend the policies as appropriate, and then we'll bring a final product back to you for recommendation to the council. Sorry. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Mr. Chairman, fellow commissioners, we appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Darren Coffey. This is Drew Williams, Lights. We're happy to be here. What we're going to do is take you through the methodology behind the cash profit policy that's before you. We're not going to get into the details of the numbers, although we certainly can answer any questions, but hopefully once you understand the methodology behind it, it's pretty straightforward stuff. So cash proffers, as with most things, all things in land use in Virginia, it's specifically enabled by state code. 2303, 2298 is the enabling legislation that says you can ask for this with the rezoning and develop this expected policy. So the methodology behind the towns program, which is very similar to other localities, it's derived from the projects that are in the annual CIP, Capital Improvement Program. The town's population, according to Prince William County, that's the data source. It includes items, recommended items that impact the town, including parks and recreation, public safety, transportation, and schools. And I'll get into that more in a minute. And it largely mirrors the county's policy, because if you're a developer in Prince William County, whether you're in a town or the county, we felt like it was prudent to have it be similar. There's not a lot of variation in methodologies from cash profit policy to cash profit policy anyway. I want to deviate just a minute and talk about the CIP. The Capital Improvement Program is an important component of the cash profit policy because that's what it's derived from. State Code 2239 also says localities may have a CIP, and that is the purview of the Planning Commission. If you have a cash profit policy, the Planning Commission has to consider the CIP and recommend it forward to the elected body. If you don't have a cash profit policy, it doesn't have to come through the Planning Commission. A lot of jurisdictions it does, some it doesn't. The elected body sometimes likes to keep that for themselves. But if you have a cash profit policy, the CIP has to come through the Planning Commission for recommendation. CIP is the major financial planning guide for capital expenditures. Any large-scale projects such as a firehouse or a schoolhouse or a town hall or a road improvement or a sidewalk is going to be in your CIP. It helps to allow you, it kind of forces you to look down the road 5 years, with year one being what will impact the annual budget. So it's a good financial planning tool for the elected body and for the commission to look at that and say, in terms of its consistency with the comprehensive plan, we think that it makes sense, and then the elected body looks at it in tandem with the operational budget and makes a recommendation. So in terms of fiscal responsibility, it can be a very effective tool. So what constitutes a capital improvement? Well, it's costs that are generally non-reoccurring in nature, and they're defined typically, each locality kind of puts their amount on it. I've seen as low as $10,000 or $15,000, $20,000 to me is more common and prudent. So that's the figure I used here, but that can fluctuate from locality to locality. But it can be for studies that are looking at capital improvements. So, if you want to look at doing a new town hall or doing a new park, and you want to, plug that the soft costs, the engineering and planning costs. You can do that in the CIP in year 2, year 3, and then have the construction be in year 4, year 5. The construction of the facilities, obviously, along with the engineering. The purchase of major equipment and vehicles. And a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, vehicles depreciate. Why, that's not capital. Capital appreciates. Why would you do that? Well, again, you would say, okay, only if it's a vehicle that exceeds this amount. Otherwise, it has to be in the annual budget. But if you have police cars, if you have large public works vehicles, if you have, if you're accounting, for example, fire engines, ambulances, a police car costs a lot of money, not necessarily because of the car, but because of the equipment that goes on the car. And so those are reoccurring costs, but they're not like annual. But there is a lifespan to that. And it's a significant cost. So in order to be able to plug that into your CIP every 5th year or 3rd year, depending on how many vehicles you have, and rotating that and getting it on a schedule, so at budget time, nobody's going, I didn't know we had to do that. No, it's on the CIP. It's, and you just move it up year to year to year. It's a very effective planning tool for that. Equipment and furnishings, again, well, that's not capital, right? That's not capital. Well, a playground costs a lot of money, right? That's equipment. It's a perfectly legitimate thing to include in your CIP, which then you could collect cash proffers to help pay for. And then acquisition of land or other property is the other category. So back on to the suggested monetary proffers. It's fairly straightforward math. You do it based on the total amount that's in the CIP for each category, and the categories are transportation, parks and recreation, public safety, and schools. And then you do it based on the population, and then you divide it out, and it's the per capita. And then we also have per housing unit type. So according to Prince William County numbers, there are 3.32 persons per unit in a single-family house, 3.04 persons for townhouses, and 2.24 persons for condominiums. So each major housing type that's called out, has a different average population. And so in order to be a little more precise in what you're asking for in your profit policy, you would say, these are the amounts per unit type that we're asking for per category. So, just to give you an example of that, for parks and recreation, you'd have the town center property. And what this is based on, what's before you, is based on the currently adopted CIP. It is not based on the proposed one that's before you this evening. But what you would want to do is, if you have a cash profit policy, then annually you would want to reevaluate it and possibly readopt it to include the most current CIP. So as you continue to load things into your CIP, you're going to amend your cash profit policy to account for those new items. The methodology won't change, but the dollar figures will change, and you want those to stay current in order for you to get the most possible from potential development and redevelopment. So you've got the Harover property, the museum. So you've got a total capital cost of $1.237 million in the 2014 CIP. Population per the 2010 census per Prince William County, 1782. That's a cost per capita of $694.16. So then you take that $694 and you multiply it by each unit type, 3.32 persons, 3.04, 2.24, and you come up with the dollar amount per dwelling unit. And then he says, well, there's X amount of dwelling units of this type times that amount. This is how much money the town would anticipate receiving as part of the rezoning application as some of the proffers, the cash proffer portion of the proffers that may be offered. So for transportation, we're recommending, if it's a residential development, that you just apply, consider the proper contribution for those housing units to help offset the transportation improvement projects. For non-residential, what we're saying is that you should consider proportional contribution. So if the project is a mixed-use development or if it's exclusively a commercial development, you should consider the impact of that development and what it's going to have on your roads and ask for proportional proffers for that. So it may not necessarily be cash, it may be the actual improvements to the roadway system that you'd be looking for in those situations. Typically, the town does not maintain its own roads, correct? So you'd be working with VDOT, and VDOT would probably say, okay, well, we would recommend a traffic impact analysis, TIA. We want you to do a TIA, we want you to do a full-blown study, and then from that, staff, commission could look at it and say, okay, this property is going to have a significant impact on these elements, on this intersection. It necessitates the need for a turn lane or signalization or whatever. And then you would say, okay, we aren't necessarily going to ask for a cash proffer for this, but we do want that improvement proffered as part of the project. And that's something that staff could proactively discuss with the developer, and then if they decided to put that in a proffer package, then they would do that. More effective than pennies, you'd be getting dollars. And it's so specific to each site and location that it's just a more effective way of doing it, in our opinion. Schools. So, the town doesn't have schools. It doesn't have a school system. So why include schools? Well, kids are expensive, and they impact the schools. It doesn't matter where they live. If they're in a town or in the county, they're impacting Prince William County taxpayers. So what other jurisdictions have done is they've said, we'll collect proffers based on the schools in the county CIP, and then give those monies to the county school board for the purpose of building new schools. You probably need to have a revenue sharing agreement in place prior to doing this. That's a town attorney issue. But the idea is that you would collect cash proffers for the schools that would be conveyed to the Prince William County school system at an appropriate time. Monetary contribution for the schools is done basically in the same way as in the previous example, with two noted exceptions. Schools do get state and federal subsidies for their capital improvements. You would subtract those out, and then there's a credit for debt service that is given, and so you subtract that out. That way, your recommended net cost per unit isn't artificially inflated. It's properly discounting and recognizing for those things, and you're just asking for the fair share portion relative to the development per the net of the school net cost per unit type, again, still. And again, this exactly mirrors what Prince William County does. So whether they're doing a development right outside the town or right inside the town, this is what the developer will be looking at. So in terms of how do you do this? Generally, developers know how to do it, but we want to make sure that the policy says very specifically how you do it. So the first rule of thumb is that the statement should be written in a clear and concise language with consideration for future interpretation. So what does that mean? That means that you and I might understand what we've been talking about, and he might understand, but when he's gone and she comes and she goes, what in the world does this mean? That's not good. So you want it to be in clear, concise language. It's very specific so that regardless of who's reading it, you understand what the intent was. And nobody can come back later and say, oh, that's not what we meant. No, that's what it says. That's the plain language of the proffer, and that's what's going to be upheld in court if necessary. Proffer language should include items that are being proffered along with when the action will occur and who's going to do it. It goes back to being clear and concise. No fuzzy language. If it's fuzzy and an alarm's going off in your head and you don't quite get it, it's not clear and concise. Proffers should state the time frame within the proffered obligation. When should it be performed? And state code has some restrictions on that, so you want to make sure that the proffers are in compliance with state code. But if the proffer is accepted and it's a more aggressive timeline than state code, then you really have to make sure that you're collecting and expending those funds appropriately. And that is it. Happy to answer any questions that we might be able to, and welcome any discussion that you might want to have.
I'm assuming that part and parcel with this is the draft.
Yes, sir. Yeah, this presentation was basically just to highlight the methodology, go over a couple of examples, but yes, sir. The full draft is before you.
I want to focus in on two things, public safety in the schools. Let's start with the shorter discussion, public safety. I noticed that the proffer amount is dramatically reduced, and it seems to only consider the police department expenditures in the CIP, and it doesn't seem to consider fire and rescue services. Granted, we do not provide them, and at the time they were last revised, it went to the volunteers, but the volunteers no longer provide the fire service principally to the town. It's now done by career staff, run by the county out of both Fire Station 4 and 24, I think it is now, on Antioch. And at the end of the day, Haymarket taxpayers are also Prince William County taxpayers. So they're paying the fire levy, they're paying the tax burden on those guys. So why is there not a factoring for the fire department services, or is there in that $39 line item?
There is not. I mean, currently you're right. It's just what is reflected in the police department line item for the CIP. I don't see any reason philosophically why you couldn't apply this policy to fire and rescue apparatus equipment. You would, again, I would, you want to confer with the town attorney and say, is there a way for us to legally do this?
There is.
And if he
It's
says
that's already a decided issue.
yes,
Yes.
then you just apply the same methodology. So you would then defer to the county's CIP, and you would divide it out, and that would become part of your profit policy. We can certainly include those items, and then you would just keep up with that on an annual basis. I do think probably you would need to have a revenue sharing agreement in place with the county that was very specific. It said, this money is to go to these things. So in other words, you're not going to give it to the county, it goes into the general fund and disappears. It's for those items. And, again, state code's pretty specific about that sort of thing. I'm sure town attorney and county attorneys can work all that out. But there's no reason philosophically you couldn't do that, in my opinion.
That issue has been brought up before, and if I recall correctly, there is no need for a revenue sharing agreement because you don't share budgetary authority with either. And it is up to the town as to how they allocate it, which is why I think it was drafted last time, that it's allocated at the town's discretion to, at that point in time, it was the volunteers because they were the one who were doing the service, but they actually had to make an application for it. And I think the last time it was actually done by Chief McGee, and the application was vetted, and then the proffer funds were subsequently allocated to the fire department. The town doing a revenue sharing, maybe it's just the language, but revenue sharing agreement with the county is something I doubt you're ever going to see, not just in this town, but in any town. The mechanism is there. The legality has been tested, and the legality has been researched and found that we can't do that. So I don't have a particular issue with that. Similarly with schools. Again, we don't have budgetary authority over the schools. However, our children do attend the schools, and we as taxpayers for Prince William County do pay for those schools as well. What the town attorney suggested last time this was by, and apparently it fits within the framework, is that, again, the monies are doled out by the town council to the schools that are serviced, or the schools that service the residents of Haymarket, and that way the schools themselves, or I think there's even a provision in there for the PTA to make the application for the proffer funds, and then they are doled out on a case-by-case basis by the town to ensure that the monies go to those schools that service to Haymarket residents who are going to be paying it, who are going to be impacted by the additional citizens, such that the money does not go into the general fund of the school for them to spend somewhere in Woodbridge, Neabsco, Occoquan, whatever. And
And before we leave the public safety item, the one thing that I wanted to note was, with regard to the police department, if there are annual budget items that the council is seeing, by all means, if you're going to do a cash profit policy, those items need to go into the CIP to the extent practicable. I mean, if you've got 2 police cars and you need to replace them every 5 years, plug it in. If there are other equipment needs that are coming up every year, 2 or 3, plug it in, because the development that occurs in the town could help pay for those items, which are that many less items that the taxpayers would have to share.
And that's exactly what's been done in the past. I think we just mirror or derive the language that we've got and go from there. I mean, I don't have much more on the schools other than there are those that are going to say the town of Haymarket doesn't have a school system, therefore we shouldn't have to pay for school proffers. And I would counsel them that they're incorrect. Every resident in this town pays their Prince William County taxes. They are impacted by additions to the schools. Additions within the town do not happen in a vacuum. So if anybody, I agree with your assessment on the schools and how to do the proffers on that. Let's go around the table if anybody else has any questions. Mr. Carroll.
Yes. I was interested in your choice of describing the $20,000 as a prudent amount, even though some people had 10 or 15 or probably 25 too. Why prudent?
Well, it's probably just my bias, because that's my experience from jurisdictions I've worked in or worked for in the past. 10,000, 5,000. I mean, at what point are you really, it should just be in the annual budget. What's really important is it recurring annually, or is it generally non-recurring? And then what is the dollar amount that is appropriate to the locality? I mean, it could be very easily that Haymarket says, we want our amount to be $10,000 or $7,500. $15,000 and $20,000 are what I am most used to seeing customarily. You can make it 25. You can make it 30. To me, you want to be able to collect it through development, if you can collect it through development, but you don't want to be so low that you're opening yourself up for a challenge of some kind. And so it's really the jurisdiction's comfort level, and probably I misspoke when I said prudent, because what's prudent to me may not be prudent to you, which may not be prudent to council. It's what's prudent to council.
Ms. Carroll?
Not at this time.
Mr. Caudle?
So you're saying that across Prince William County, that dollar amount is pretty standard?
See, for the CIP amount, is that what they use, or do we not know? I don't know.
Which figure are you looking at?
I didn't look at, we didn't look at the CIP for Prince William County. Or the other towns. We were looking, Dumfries is 20,000.
Right.
Other jurisdictions I've been in are 15 or 20,000.
The reason I ask that, I'm a business. I'm considering where I'm going to build my business. I'm going to develop. And if I can develop some, I guess my question is, what's the balance between the proffers and being business friendly? I mean, obviously, everybody has to pay their fair share, but you understand my question? Like, if ours is way out of, it's really high compared to the surrounding jurisdictions, and I'm looking to invite business into a town for a tax base and things of that, where does it become a detriment? I mean, what's the cutoff? Am I making sense with it?
Yeah, absolutely. My response to that would be, if the cash profit policy follows the methodology that's proposed, you're not going to be at all out of line with that of the county. And I would think developing in the town is a much streamlined process over developing in the county. The county, just due to its size, is more complex. There are more fees. It's just, and then why do you want to have your business in the town versus in the county?
Right.
Because of everything that a town can offer. So you could definitely, and other counties have adopted cash profit policies that were very high, and the intent was to stymie growth. And those policies have been challenged, and those policies sometimes have been amended as a result of that. We're just simply saying, just be straightforward.
Right.
Put in your CIP what you need in your CIP, and then do the math, and there's your cash profit policy. And it won't put you at a disadvantage, in my opinion.
Right, I mean, I'm not looking to stymie growth, I'm looking to create it. So
Right.
I'm just
Absolutely.
curious, I get the math part, but,
If you were to ask a business person or a developer, you might get, ask 5 of them, you might get 5 different answers. You might get 4 of them saying they don't want you to do this, it's more money. The reality, in my experience, is that cash proffers are passed through anyway. So if you're putting $2,300 on a house, that house is going to cost $2,300 more.
right,
Okay, well, you and I are still going to buy the house. Because
Right.
if it's a $200,000 house, if it's a $203,000 house, we're going to buy that house.
right.
The developer is not eating that cost, again, in my opinion, and in my observation over years of doing it. So there's a philosophical, no, we don't want you to increase our costs, don't increase our costs. To me, they're passed through more times than not.
Right. I mean, I get that part.
I think I can elaborate on that a little bit, too. Taking it from a jurisdictional standpoint, if you compare what's on the proposed one here on page 28 and the county's one on page 38, you're looking at a proffer schedule that's significantly less expensive than the county. And the county, to be honest with you, is probably one of the lower municipal-type counties when it comes to proffers. In fact, it's one of the great criticisms for Prince William County is that they don't charge enough proffers. And the flip side to being That being said, the flip side to being business-friendly and driving your profit fees down is that while you might be business-friendly and encourage some sort of development by doing that and give yourself some advantage by the same token, when you do that, you also increase the tax burden on the existing residents and the businesses, which is not terribly short-term gain for long-term loss, yes.
I'm not,
But
I just want to be understood. I'm just curious to how this compares to others, like equal size. I heard Dumfries, I see what it is now in the county.
It's very comparable.
Right,
It's
that's
very
all I'm
comparable.
asking.
It depends more on what's in your CIP than your CIP and your population.
Right,
And your population, for now, is what it is. It's going to continue going up. But what's in your CIP, is it adequate, or is it? Now, a lot of jurisdictions just simply don't take their capital improvement program seriously. It's a paper exercise that is a pain for them to do every year, and they don't want to do it. And I would suggest to you that it's one of the most important things you could do as a body, as a commission, is advise your council on the capital improvement program and make sure that it's loaded up with everything that is needed and desired for the town in order to maintain the quality of life that you want for each of the categories.
So as a real-world example, we're going to go over these again tonight.
Right.
So if you go for the $2 million version of this as opposed to the $7 million version of this, you're going to need, your profit policies are going to be less because you need $5 million less. So it really, the basis of it is more what's in your CIP than the math or the mechanics. How much do you want for the town? How much does the county, the board want for the town? That's really what it comes down to. That's where you're funding it through. So the more you want for the town, the more amenities you want for the town, the more expensive it's going to be for businesses to come here and proffers.
Right.
It's a balance.
One of the other things that's not in your CIP that, in my opinion, could be is IT. I mean, if you have any information technology infrastructure needs that may be occurring every 5 years or so, then you put IT in there. So that amount doesn't drive how much you collect or don't collect. That amount is the threshold that you're setting for whether it qualifies or not. And typically, if you're buying computers for everybody, every 5 years, it could exceed that amount. If you've got them on a rotating schedule, maybe it doesn't, and you're just doing it as part of the annual budget. But, you know, any category that's legitimate, it's a legitimate non-recurring cost for the town, can go into the CIP, and if it meets that definition, that threshold, and it's eligible, and then it's just a matter of what's the amount of the property, what's the capital amount of the project, divided out, multiplied by the housing type, and you got it.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm
Certainly.
I think it's important to remember, too, that the strive through the comprehensive plan is a balanced community. I think a lot of times people have relied heavily on the proffers and development to offset capital improvement costs. So much like most of us developed in areas in the town had anticipated and planned that development, and that's affected the tax rate in our capital improvements program. So the intent of the proffer policy is not to cover all expenses. It's only those expenses attributed to those unplanned densities above what we had already anticipated. Does that make sense? So I think ideally we'll always have a planned community that will have enough commercial development to offset the costs of providing services. Most communities have developed that way. The state has this unique system of being able to do the proffer policies. So hopefully you understood my point, is that it's not meant to offset all costs, only those attributed to those unplanned densities, and hopefully catch up in the service demands that may be, there's a gap between what we had planned for with a comprehensive plan and what these rezoning requests are, and that will be more quickly offsetting the costs on those additional capital improvements. So, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Caudle?
Nope.
Mr. Ring?
No.
Mr. Maddox?
Nope.
Back around, anybody else? All right. I've got two suggestions. First, if it's without objection, I'd like to direct the contractor to amend the policy to include fire department equipment, apparatus, that sort of thing, and work with some sort of language so that the town council can direct the transfer of any fire department or school funds to those established schools and/or fire stations which service the existing Haymarket community. Any objections?
Is this done in other towns? I'm just curious. Are you aware of, when you mentioned revenue sharing, and this is a different model?
I would be surprised if they don't use practice.
They may have their own fire department as well, just as
But the answer is yes. You're not out on a limb here.
And the model of not going with the revenue sharing, obviously that's the model that Mr. Ware
Well,
said is
yeah.
really not viable.
Not an option.
It's not an option.
Yeah, I mean, and revenue share may not even be the right term to use, but whatever legal mechanism the town attorney recommends is what I would go with. If it's been researched, it's been researched. That is not my, I got the planner land use hat on, not the attorney hat.
So no objection?
No objection to that, no.
You've got,
Yes, sir.
Marshawn, you'll work with him on that?
Got the language and we'll
Correct.
check it.
But
So-
kind of along those lines, site-based management, you know, what kind of control do we really have over where this money goes?
Experience has been that if you transfer the money to a county entity with a specific proviso as to what it is going to be used for, and I think we've actually required receipts in the past.
Oh, excellent.
I know
Okay.
that, in fact, I know for a fact that the fire department actually delivered receipts when they came forward with a request for funding for brand-new hoses to replace those that hadn't been replaced in something like 25 years. Chief McGee actually brought forth a proposal and the price tag for it, and then when the monies were actually expended on those fire hoses, they actually provided a copy of the receipt.
Excellent.
I believe the PTAs have done the same with the schools in the past, if
They
I'm not
have. I
mistaken.
mean, the previous resolution you have on page 23 does have footnotes which say to be transferred to Prince William County Schools and the Gainesville Volunteer Fire Department. So I think you would, to your recommendation, you would want to have either a planning area or some other specific language that talks about doing, I think with the PTA.
The
Correct.
mechanisms.
I think last time we got monies was from Alexander's Keep, and the PTAs came in, and so those were monies more toward the Computer Resource Center and those types of things. It wasn't money put toward bricks and mortar. So,
Or cost reduction or some
Well, you can't
specific.
do class reduction. You can only do, class reduction involves salaries and benefits.
so to me, typically, you have your operating expenses and you have your capital expenses. In my familiarity is with Loudon, that you're collecting on the capital expense for schools. The bricks and mortar, the actual school facilities that'll be serving this versus kind of the annual operating costs, which you have that gray area about, our new computers and operating costs or their costs. But nonetheless,
Most places with a system as large as Prince William County Schools, your computer upgrades or your computer additions, labs, and I think in the case of the computer lab, it was, an additional program that they didn't have. Then you get into playgrounds and all that other stuff, which obviously fits as a capital improvement.
I think that's, calling it a revenue sharing, I think the idea is that since we're not funding in our CIP, there has to be something that bridges the gap from us accepting those monies and transferring it over if that's the policy of the council.
The term revenue sharing conjures up something that.
Well, proffers are revenues.
My
it's sharing.
apologies.
It's,
Strike that from the record.
I have a bad experience with it, and it screams the word cop-out to me for a variety of reasons.
Strike that from your mouth.
Yeah. The other recommendation I would have is to reevaluate the proffer amounts based on the FY16 CIP, which should be adopted within 30 to 60 days.
And you're talking about it on your next item.
Yeah, so I'm going to expect that this will be revised to accommodate that CIP.
If that's the recommendation of the commission, we'll.
Is there any objection to that?
No.
So noted. All right.
Now, do you want to advertise this for hearing next month and to make a recommendation, or how would you like to move it forward? I think right now the recommendation would be you either hold your own hearing or I know you don't like the word joint hearing, but,
To be honest with you, with proffer policies and given the way the legislature's been handling these in the last couple of years, I'd like to have everything nailed down and defined before we have a public hearing. I don't want to be holding a public hearing where nobody's seen the numbers without a significant lead time, and I don't know that you're going to be able to cobble it all together prior to the next meeting because the CIP hasn't. In fact, I know you're not going to be able to because the CIP hasn't been adopted yet. I mean, you can probably get well down the road to being there, assuming the town
Workable
council
draft.
adopts it.
Okay.
Yeah, but as far as one that's ready for publication, I doubt it's going to be ready by January.
so you'd like to look at the amended policy next month and then schedule it?
Well,
for
I'd like to have a draft done next month that we can move from there, and then if there's some fine tuning that has to be done, fine. But I don't want to get in a situation where we're within the publication window, we don't have the numbers nailed down, and somebody questions it prior to the public hearing, and we have to start all over again and redo it. Especially as expensive as that public hearing notice may or may not be, depending on the length. So I would prefer to have the draft next month. We nail down the numbers, and then we can set the public hearing date at that point in time, whether it be a separate public hearing here or a joint public hearing with the town council on something like this, where you're going to have an impact on the development community as potentially large as it is. There is a significant increase in some of the proffers. It's one of those that I think I'd rather go to the time and the expense of jumping through the procedural hoops just to nail it down and make sure that we don't leave any opportunity for anybody to question the methodology or the adoption process. So my suggestion at that point in time is probably going to be for two separate hearings and give everybody the opportunity. My guess is nobody is going to show up and testify at either one of them. But I don't want to get down the road, 6 months, 9 months down the road and have somebody question it. So.
Okay.
All right.
I had one other question.
Certainly.
Referring to basically page 7BD, which really, Brian isn't here, and it was a 7BD, page 25.
7B.
It's packet page 25.
Okay.
But it was to Marchant, and I can understand what we have said here about a capital improvement police car, because we have one in our CIP for $38,000, I think. I don't understand the second paragraph of this letter, and maybe it's not fair asking you, Marchant, since Brian wrote it. I don't understand the term a capital purchase, that language in that way.
Oh, good, I can interpret that.
No, I'm just saying there should be an answer on
I
the
don't
previous.
understand it either.
It's currently defined in our CIP. The definition is correct. However, that would preclude some items in the police department, such as a patrol car.
I don't understand.
It wasn't your answer on the that's why I handed it to you. The answer was on the preceding page. Sorry, Darren, that's why I was handing it to you.
Oh, yes, this is based on my email.
Okay, yeah.
Even though vehicles do depreciate in value, it's perfectly acceptable and recommended that they be included in the CIP if their value exceeds the threshold that is set, and they need to be replaced on a routine basis. The police vehicle, with all of its equipment, is a perfect example of a typical and necessary CIP item.
I'm not sure that answered your question, I'm sorry.
I guess I'm just, I was unsure about the terminology capital purchase in that sense.
If it's in the CIP, it'd be a capital purchase.
Okay, so,
And if it meets the definitions and criteria set forth in your capital improvement program, then you'd be good to go.
even though this says that would preclude some items in the police department, such as a patrol car.
That's our determination and the council's determination at the end of the day.
Yeah, it appears to me that he's referencing something about your current CIP
Right.
language, which you would want to take a close look at and amend, possibly this evening.
So right now, the CIP doesn't include those
Quite
line
likely
items?
this evening, because it's the first time I've heard of this. Okay. Could just be an interpretation matter, too, so we'll see.
Yeah, now that it rings a bell is that there's several items in the budget related to capital equipment and material
Yes.
purchases for the police department. So if you establish that 10,000 or 20,000, then several of those items will exceed that amount. So,
Thank you.
Anything else?
thanks, sir.
All right, Hanover Master Plan recommendations. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Do we need a break or anything before we jump into this? May I ask for a 2-second break to go use the restroom?
Recess for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Very quiet.
Oh, nice.
Call the meeting back to order. Mr. Schneider, the Hanover Master Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hold on, we're turning back on the video. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So most of you were in attendance with the meeting last month where the consultant for the master plan came back, proposed 3 scenarios for development of the Hanover properties. In the packet with you is a copy of each of the concepts. There was also a comparison of the 3 based on consultants' input. I also include in the packet excerpts from the comprehensive plan that make the reference to what we've formerly called the Sears homes. The way I would suggest the commission approach this is with your charge of administering the comprehensive plan and the CIP and those other elements and recommendations to the council, that you would base your recommendation on those policies and the CIP that you're developing or will be recommending in our old business. So that being said, these are simply concepts. I would anticipate, much like the town center master plan, that the fine-tuning, the details, a sculpture garden versus an open play area, I mean, those types of decisions, I think, can be made as the project, should the council and commission decide to actually start to develop these plans, that minutia can get in. I think generally today, the idea is, do we support a concept, and that concept maybe incorporate some other elements from some of the other proposals and make that part of your recommendation along with the applicable policies. Now, what the policies do talk about is several things. And I think the consensus from the group was keeping this as a public park, recognizing the loss of commercial, or not commercial, but public open space, smaller public services or public facilities to serve the residents in and around a Haymarket, and also speaking highly of the reuse of those buildings as part of any plan, both as a town property and as a contributing resource to the town. I think the policies really look at the reuse of the buildings as a resource, not necessarily an obstacle. I think obviously every time you repurpose a building, there's some challenges inherent to that. I also wanted to provide you, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay, pass out to you The concept that was vetted the last time, we were looking at moving town hall down there. Let me pass these out to you. So what I passed out to you is at the point that Town Hall was going to be moved from this property down, what you'll see was a general sketch of the parking plan. The hatched area in the middle was actually going to be in addition to the food pantry and provide a more formal meeting space and meeting area. At the point that the town decided not to move forward with that, these plans kind of went back on the shelf, but as you'll see, there was some effort into trying to incorporate that. You'll see some phases. This is actually from Linda Landwehr's files. You'll see some hand notes on the front. This was the plan as of 2008, and John Parnham, our architect from our ARB, is the one that put these together. Mr. Chairman, there's no timeline to make a recommendation to the council. So certainly tonight, if it's one of those things where you want to maybe put some pros and cons to each elements, maybe talk about some elements of part of any plan that gets adopted, then we can make a more formal recommendation to the council next month if that's your desire. So.
Thanks for the no timeline, because that was going to be my first question. And I'm kind of, in this particular instance, I'm kind of inclined, given all the stuff that we've got coming down the pike, to do this a little bit differently than we've done most things in the past. And I would solicit some input from the rest of the commission. What I would like to do on this is form either a two or three person subcommittee to review the past, the present, the options, and sort of draft a bullet point or framework, factoring in things like, potential renovation and reuse of the existing buildings, potentially demolition of the buildings, look at the scope of alternatives that were presented by the contractor, and sort of put together a more or less kind of 40,000-foot view of what that subgroup would like to see, and then vet it from that point so that we don't have 5 conflicting views going at it, but we get some opportunity for people to do this offline, and, well, not offline, if it's going to be a 3-person committee, you're not to meet here, but work it out in sort of in a more informal type of environment, hash some ideas around, have it open to the public, have any interested parties afforded the opportunity to have some input at whomever is going to be running the committee or the subcommittee's discretion, and work it out that way. And hopefully, I think it's a little ambitious to have it ready by next month, but certainly by the 1st of July, I think we could have something that we could then consider and fine-tune and winnow it down. That's my thought, and I'll entertain anybody's thoughts. Mr. Maddox?
Would you consider having perhaps just all PC members, which include maybe town council rep or ARB rep in this process? I'm not pointing fingers, but just looking at a little bit of diversity in terms of ways that we can approach this as a subgroup.
I'm certainly not averse to inviting the ARB and town council to
You kind of have your 2 liaisons right here. So.
Well, and actually, I was going to recommend the same thing, because one of my big concerns has been, without council input, we don't know budget, there's a lot of guidance that the council should provide that we, the planning commission, or we, the ARB, should not. So I'm more than willing to be on the subcommittee, but I would like council representation on that committee, because
I guess
we could come up with a $20 million plan.
I think, what we've, and that's, so here's the challenge we have is we're a small town, we're kind of overlap a lot of our roles. In thinking about this as your town planner, it's what is your policy, what was your feedback from those, and while you probably need to be somewhat sensitive to cost, which one of these best meets the feedback, the policy, and whatever previous history you have, that's what you bring forward, and the council can decide whether or not to enhance it all or not. At that level is where you start to get into nickel and dimes. I really think the point of this exercise was to be, is the concept supported by, again, all the feedback, the policy, and that's there, and then you move that forward, and then that turns around and gets whittled down into the more, what are the costs of doing the buildings, what are the costs of doing those types of things, but the general consensus on the concept. Again, not necessarily a sculpture garden or a wedding gazebo. It's more of a, do we want a more dominant, do the policies support a more dominant solely commercial or recreation center? Do they promote the hybrid, or do they more support the first option that's there? So I know we all want to be sucked in because we're town members and we want to get into that. But I really think at this point, the commission's level is more of a, like you said, a 40,000 square foot. And then if it gets up to the council says, hey, this is something we can't afford based on the input, then they're going to send it back down to you and the ARB and say, refine it again.
He said.
Sorry to be long-winded. I've lost a lot of sleep over this.
Really?
Yeah, this is my job.
This I meant this particular, forget it.
No, it's a tremendous amount of opportunity.
Is there any dissension from pursuing that path, or?
Well, let me ask you, you were going to provide some kind of a policy outline to the ARB, were you not?
I did. Basically, what I've included with your packet, I've pulled from each of the elements of the plan, and I also included the historic district inventory of the buildings and stuff.
I have a couple comments. First of all, I've heard conflicting things. Are those two homes Sears homes, or are they some other type? I've heard
They are not
various
Sears
things.
homes, they are Medford?
Yeah, the name just escaped me. I'm sorry, Mr. Cottle, but they were confirmed as it is a modular home, but it wasn't a Sears prefabricated home. It was it was a Lewis manufacturing home.
So the historic buildings inventory is really inaccurate because it's not a Sears and Roebuck where somebody mail ordered it, right?
It's still a mail order catalog. It's
Right,
still a
but I'm
mail order
saying it's
facility.
not
but it's Sears versus a Lewis manufactured home.
Okay.
It's not completely in error. The manufacturer's in error. It is still modular. It is still similar in visual appearance,
Right.
elevation, that kind of thing. Apparently, a Lewis home has more value than a Sears home.
It's more.
It's rarer, I think.
Yeah, it's more rare, but I'm sorry. I'll let you finish your question.
It's arose by any other name, I think,
Okay.
as far as most people are concerned.
All right, my second question is, what would preclude us from taking these three visual concepts, mailing them to every resident in the town, and saying, these are three concepts that have been developed, vote on which one you like, then you just simply do a tally, then you go to the planning commission or whichever way you want to do it, town council, and then start going to one. I mean,
That was supposed to be the stakeholders meeting that generated these three concepts.
I
was the
understand that, but
invitation.
sometimes you have to go to the citizens. They're not always going to come here. So, I mean, we all know to increase participation, sometimes we have to go the extra mile. So while I know they should be coming here, the reality is they're over at QBE with their kid playing baseball. They're running all over the place. So I'm just saying, to mail this out to the citizens and get their input, at least we as a town have gone the extra mile.
Gotcha. I think with the policies in the plan, the last time it was publicly vetted and the public was brought out, there's two elements. One, that the property be kept in some sort of public property, and that the houses be incorporated in some fashion, and ultimately that plan. That was the consensus of the community at the time that those plans were adopted. I think now, in terms of going one of these three plans, your policy and feedback would probably support the first one more than the other two. The third one seems well beyond what the policies recommended, but that came out of the stakeholders forum. If the commission wanted to recommend that you send out a mailing with all those three, that's certainly within your prerogative. There's an expense. We can probably figure out how to pull that from it. There's also the typical social medias we have that we've tried before, the Facebook, the Twitter, all the other elements. We could do that as well, if that's what the commission wants to do.
but I think you also have to be very careful. You can't just send those 3 drawings out. Because when we've discussed those before, the concept behind those drawings is very, very different, as is the price. The one over there is $2 million. That one's $7 million.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. That's what I'm
So,
saying. I mean,
when you send something out broadcast like that, you can't just, you have to be very careful about the information you send out. It can't be too much, it can't be too little.
right, I understand, but there has to be some information given. So, I mean, you're looking, this concept here is 3 times or 2.5 times what the first one is. From my vantage point, this looks a lot more developed, and we're trying to preserve as much green space as possible. I'm just saying, it's the town's property, it's the people, the citizens, they should have a say.
Well, and again, along with that more developed look is a greater number of services. So so kind of just in general, that's the more passive one. Then you get into some services, and this one here, this is truly, you'd have probably 1 or 2 full-time staff. You'd have a number of things, whether it be a conference center or a ball court or something like that, much, much more active. So, and that's not necessarily apparent just from the drawings. So the concept of passive, much more active, this one would probably be, again, staff that would probably be county staff or some kind of a shared thing with the county. So the concepts are very involved once you get into it. And that's an important thing to understand. So if the town residents want small, passive, and what we talked about was town of Haymarket as opposed to active mailing address of Haymarket, that's the idea that needs to be communicated if you're going to put this idea out there to the people that are looking at it.
Well, I'm not saying you just mail that with no explanation, but like, for example, concept B, you're talking a potential swimming pool. I mean, what are the maintenance costs? What's going to be the full-time? Somebody's got to run that thing. So you have the cost of building that. You also have the cost of maintaining it, plus you have the cost of, there's going to be additional tax burdens passed along somewhere because you have to pay, you have to run it.
And
So,
I think that's one of the, all of your comments are one of the principal reasons I want some form of subcommittee to sort of vet that, and that's why I want it winnowed out. I mean, there are some things in these plans that, quite frankly, are going to be non-starters for a lot of people, if not everybody, from the get-go, and perhaps swimming pool is one of those. I mean, the maintenance cost of those, simply blasting into that granite hillside to put one in is going to be expensive, but that's what I'd kind of like. I'd kind of like subcommittee to come together with some sort of baseline of what, here's the least we can do, here's the most we can do, here are the options we've considered, and here's what we would suggest as a baseline sort of framework, and then you can subtract, add as you wish, come up with something, and then forward it to town council for consideration. But I want to get down to the point where we're not going to spend hours debating the obvious, because the obvious will have already been gone, and that's why I want the process to be open. So if the citizens want to come in and have input in it, I would like to think that the committee would accept that. I want everything to be open, but I want it to be a whole lot less formal, at least at that earliest stage, so you can kind of get a sense of what everybody wants to be, what everybody wants to be done. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to make a decision and come up with a draft and a framework. And I would hope that at the end of the day, this commission as a body would more or less defer to the subcommittee, having worked out everything and that sort of thing. But I think throwing all the information that we've got at the residence right now with no interpretation, no buffer, it's going to come down to, they're going to look at 3 plans, they're going to look at 3 price tags, or they're going to look at 3 plans and they're going to look at the amount of impervious space, and they're going to make a decision based on that, and then they may or they may not comment. And I think at the end of the day, through a mail solicitation, you're probably not going to get that much input just based on experience. I mean, so it's sort of a diminishing returns kind of thing for the expense that you're going to do. I'd rather get about another couple of blocks down the road to a point where we've got something that's a little more concrete and it's sort of winnowed out both the favorable and the unfavorable aspects, and we've got something that's a little. It's both a little more defined and it's a little more malleable because you've got your options built in. We can have this space and do X, Y, Z with it, or we can do this space and do X, Y, Z, and X, Y, Z may be the same for two different parts of the complex, but it gives you the opportunity to move it around and play with it.
So real quick, taking both points, taking the point of the subcommittee and taking the point that there has been a study done in the past, I think if the subcommittee were to take that information, initially work out that draft. Essentially, our job at the end of the day is to ensure that whatever plan we adopt best matches the town's CIP. Not, one neighborhood prefers this over the other. It's what the CIP, it's essentially our guide.
The CIP is going to be the cost associated with whatever this plan ultimately that's
right. So there are many different factors that go into it.
And so, I'm sorry, I cut you off before you finish.
No, go ahead.
Because I think, so this is I understand your point, but at some point, the feedback, I think you have a lot of the policy guidance and feedback you already have. You have the stakeholder feedback that we have posted on the summary that the consultant put back. We have the policy guidance from before. We have, I'm trying to think of the other venue with which this has been done. We have some of the previous work that's been done. So I think you have a lot of baseline information already as a commission to make your recommendation. Again, the point where we're getting sucked in with costs, I really think, in my mind, the commission's charge is to recommend to the council, absent of a specific cost, policies would support one of these over the other for these reasons, incorporating the houses or one or the other, keeping it for a more public space, open space. I mean, your policies clearly say it's meant to be more of a dominant open space and more of a true facility. So I think you have enough direction in front of you to make a pretty confident recommendation to the council for one of these options that are there. To the point that you want to, I understand the same thing. You want to make sure you get enough of the public input, but at some point, and I've done this a lot. You can keep bringing it to their attention. I guess at what point do you really not get the feedback and you delay making a command decision? So it's a hard. I understand the position that you're in. It's a hard thing to do.
I'm not opposed to making a command decision.
Okay.
I'm just, how many people, I know approximately how many people came to that stakeholder meeting, and there's a whole lot more people in the town that came to that meeting. So, what the chairman says, it's a valid point, maybe winnow it down a little bit. At some point, I think we need to go back to the citizens. Here's 2 proposals or 3 proposals. Here's what can be done with each one.
Yep.
And then just get their input and then come back. And I'm also not for taking another 5 years to doing something either. This has been dragging on forever.
I like that suggestion. Maybe you say out of that subcommittee, one of these, what's the other thing? One of these things is not like the other. One of these clearly doesn't meet the feedback we've seen so far, and you narrow it down to 2. I think that gets you closer to making a decision, but enough of a concept where people can provide their feedback. So.
It also allows you to take it to the point where you can have something akin to a public hearing, and you can solicit all of that input. You're just doing that with less information. Well, not less information,
but a more refined
concept. More refined concept, and you're sort of throwing out the extraneous stuff that it's more limited, but it's both more limited, but it's also more concrete in what you're going to do. But that's my suggestion, and we can throw that out the window and start back over again, but it's up to you guys.
I think there's an awful lot of information on the 3 plans, so I really would agree with doing some winnowing, because it's almost information
Overload.
overkill
Yeah.
for somebody to synthesize and to decide what to have. At the same time, I like the idea of reaching out to the public once we winnow down, but I would suggest perhaps getting permission from like Food Lion or Walmart or someplace to put some sort of a visual up. I don't know how, instead of a direct mailing, I don't know, some way that people could put comments in a box or something, and that sounds silly, or to give comments here so that they would have input. Because I think a lot of things that come to your house, we just
Throw it away.
recycle immediately. I don't even
You
open
know,
some
Yeah,
envelopes.
that's a good point. Who's the Facebook moderator for the town?
Jen?
Jen?
Well, a couple things. To your point, these haven't been posted anywhere,
Right.
other than in your agenda. We could put them somewhere in display, as one example, put them in display in Town Hall. Facebook, you could put them in a smaller form in the other public places.
I would suggest putting less information, getting down to maybe 2 at the most, and even on those 2, streamlining some of the information so that people don't have, it's like too much available, too much information. We know what we're going with our, our comprehensive plan and we know what we want, we know what the people have already said somewhat of what they want, so we can winnow that information to make it more digestible and easier to comment on, so that we get both sides.
So I'll take that as a yes to the subcommittee idea.
I think it's an excellent idea.
Okay, now the fun part. Who's going to volunteer for it?
I will definitely volunteer for
1,
it.
2,
I would do it.
3. Any other interest?
I would do it.
4.
I would do it.
Well, if you want to call it a work session, you can call it a work session.
I mean, that's what it is at
I
this
tell you what,
point.
we'll do it as a committee of the whole, and I don't want to chair that subcommittee. So I will let you guys decide that amongst yourselves. All
I
you need to do
nominate
is-
Ralph. He has the ARB.
I'll be happy to chair it.
Yeah, I second that. He's got the ARB.
Tell you what, why don't we just set a work session date for that, and whomever shows up can decide at that point in
that
time
time.
who is going to do it. Is there a date that is, I tell you what,
Oh, this is going to be amazing.
yeah, it's going to be amusing trying to set a date right now.
Bless you.
Tell you what, can everybody email me their availability for the next 3 weeks?
What
Or
about,
more importantly, what dates they're unavailable, and I'll try and work something out.
what would be the possibility of doing something before our next plan meeting, like a couple hours early or something, since we all have the date already blocked off anyway?
A
We
work
could all-
session beforehand, like at 6 or 5.
Right, I mean, 5 o'clock, rather than come up with another date where we can all get together, we know when the next PC meeting is, if we just say instead of start the normal meeting at 7, but back it up a couple hours, we could take time to look through this.
The reason I wanted to do this separately is, well, for 2 reasons. If we do that prior to the regular planning commission meeting, by the time the regular planning commission meeting starts up, and we may or may not have some very complex issues by next month,
Correct.
I don't want anybody experiencing burnout before the meeting even begins. And the other part of it is that, good intentions aside, these kind of things sort of tend to drag out and take significantly more time than people anticipate. And I don't want to lock anybody into a sort of set time frame where they feel rushed or like they haven't had their voice heard. I'd like to leave it a little more free-flowing so that you can start it up, stop it when you get tired, and reconvene at some later date. This is something that's going to take a lot of focus and a lot of work, and I just feel like there's the potential for people working at cross purposes. If we have to do this, then you have to focus on something else, and things will get lost in the shuffle. It's too big a project for us not to take very, very seriously and to define and to put the necessary focus on. So I'd like to sort of just at least here at the preliminary stage, separate it from the normal process, just so that it's, I don't know if it's treated special is the right word, but accorded the focus that it's going to require to be done properly.
I think also prior to our next scheduled meeting, there should be some codified outcome of this, which we're going to need to either present to the council or present to the residents, something like that.
Yeah.
So that we have a written agreement amongst all of us as opposed to, oh, I thought you meant, but no, didn't you mean?
Well, I would expect you to provide a formal recommendation to them.
Right. So I think we need some time to do that, and there's not enough time if we do it a couple hours before the regular meeting.
I do recommend probably the 27th of May, which is a Wednesday. It's the last full week of May.
What
And
day
it would give
is,
us- it would
what's
give us-
Memorial Day?
Memorial's the 25th. So that gives people time for vacation before and after if they go out of town.
What about Thursday? I don't want to.
Thursday's the 28th.
No,
No.
Mo and Phil.
Let's go ahead and send Bob our unavailable dates, and we'll hash it out.
The idea I had
28th
is
is fine for us.
the 20th, 28th,
I thought you said the 20th.
No.
the 28th.
28th is fine.
Yeah, it works. This way, it's, 2 weeks after this meeting and 2 weeks prior to the next PC meeting. So it's right in the middle.
So the next question is, what would be helpful to you? Do you want to have 11 by 17s of these
I'll
that you
get
can
you-
mark up? Do you want to?
Let me get to that in a second. Can you publish the work session for the 28th, 7 o'clock or
7.
7? Okay. What I would like to see provided is all of this material, the past material from the ARB/Param/
What I just passed out, right?
what you just passed out. I'd like, so that there's no question as to what the residents have said, I'd like the comments from the comp plan survey that Linda did, those aspects that dealt with this, because there were a significant number of questions that dealt directly with this, and there's a wealth of information in that. The resolutions for the purchase of the property, I would say the CIPs from the last couple of years, but I think that's delving into too much detail, because I don't want anybody to get the sense that there's somehow confined by CIP numbers. I think that will probably do it, and anything else that you can think of.
I'll
feel
put
free.
in the policy thing again, so.
Okay. But I think we do need to incorporate those comments from the CIP, from the last time we did the comp plan, because there was a wealth of information and actually specific details, as I recall. Maybe I'll.
Okay, do you want the survey result, or not the survey, but the summary notes from the
Yes.
forum? Okay. Okay. Now, in terms of materials to help you, do you want matrices that you can fill out? Is there something help you make your decision quicker?
I think that's going to be a personal thing for each member. What I
Okay.
would like is a plat with distances and elevations. I'm sure we've got one.
Oh,
Just-
I got one right over here.
Yeah, just so that if somebody says, I want to build a swimming pool, you can point to the Granite Ridge and where the Granite Ridge is located and how much it costs to do blasting to put in a swimming pool.
Well, again,
Yeah, I mean, just,
we run the concept up and the practicality knocks it out.
putting in a horse racing track, and then you can figure out how much land you would have to grade to make a level area.
Okay.
So,
And, right, and make sure that it has, that the surrounding communities are not obscured, because we've got the 5 houses going in on Blight. The houses that are back there now are going to be impacted, and there was a whole thing when there was going to be a walking path back there, which I'm sure we'll get into.
to that end, Marchant,
Yep.
when it comes time to forward the recommendation and have the requisite hearings on that and that sort of thing, are we or should we treat this, my inclination is yes, should we treat this along the lines of a rezoning and formally notice adjacent property owners or property owners within 250 feet, just,
Yeah, I don't think, it's in the comprehensive plan as a public property. It's
Yeah.
been advertised in all our planning documents for what this is meant to be. If you want to solicit input, then yeah, we can run
I'd like to go the
hearings,
extra
but-
mile, if not for the entirety of the town, at least for those that are going to be most directly impacted. And I think what the rule of thumb is 250 linear feet, something like that.
Yeah, 250 linear feet or parcels adjacent or adjoining or
Which
across the
covers
street.
probably a quarter of the town. No, maybe 20%. Okay.
Yeah, you make that as part of it. I don't see a legal requirement for the hearing, but if you wanted to have that, that's fine too. Goes back to your earlier.
As a matter of good public policy, I think, and outreach, I think that would be the thing to do.
Yeah, but I think the general consensus is always meant to be some sort of public use.
I don't think that's a dispute. It's just,
Yeah.
again,
the details of it, yeah.
Yeah, how many ever years ago, there was a hearing on the walking path back there that got quite contentious.
Yeah, I just don't want there to be anybody screaming that is directly impacted, whether it's by Klieg lights for a baseball stadium or whatever, that they weren't properly notified, so you know how that goes.
Yep.
All right, without further, anything further, we're going to skip down to the next item. Anybody? Okay. Capital Improvement Plan, Mr. Snyder.
This was a carryover last month, Mr. Chairman. We decided to go ahead and hold a public hearing, which you've had. At this point, the budget has already been advertised. I would have to consult with the attorney if we wanted to add or transfer those items that are on the budget to line items as part of the CIP. I think as long as it's not an increase, I don't see that as a big deal, but I would look to the commission's guidance on whether or not the transfer improves. I don't have the budget in front of me, so I couldn't tell you where those would come from, other than we know that we're having the purchase of the cars, the police cars.
The vehicle is on here.
It is in there? Okay.
Yeah, which is why I don't understand the town manager's comment.
Well, maybe because it showed up after that email. Because the CIP was updated. You had asked to add, wasn't there monies you had asked to add in there for, Mr. Chairman, it was 2 months ago, you had asked putting monies in for something that we were looking at.
See, your memory's as bad as mine.
The quiet
Oh,
zone.
the
You had
quiet
asked
zone.
for additions with the quiet zone, thank you. And
Which
so,
I would still like to see in there, yes.
it's not in there?
No, it's not.
Point me to which page you have, I had a different copy.
It's packet page 67.
Packet page 72 shows it on a quiet zone, right before the police department down. The line before the police department has a quiet zone.
It looks
It's
for
on there, but it's not on
2016,
a summary of
2017.
50,000. Which means the summary doesn't match the, great.
Okay.
All right, let's just ignore page 67 and just go to page
72.
72 and work the two out. Well, actually, we're going to have to do both of them because we got to make sure that both are on here.
Okay, so on page 72,
Let's take them item by item. Light posts are on there at $7,000 in both places. Benches and trash cans lines up.
do the security committee on
Crosswalk
that?
repair is on there at the same amount. Shared use path, is that entirely funded by the Conley grant?
Yes.
Okay. Town center master plan construction. And the numbers do not match.
Mr. Chairman, which number are you talking about?
67.
Town center master plan construction is 350 in the summary and 500 in the current year. I'm comfortable with the 500 and leaving the CIP that way.
Okay, I believe and I apologize, this was updated subsequent table, and that's what we're basing, I believe.
I'm basing it on the table, correct?
On the table, and then the accompanying narrative, I can't explain why those numbers weren't updated, but the one that the council's looking at is the one based on page 72.
Okay. Master plan engineering, 75. Master plan construction, 300. Okay, I don't know. All right, I would,
You do have the police department improvements on there, I
quite
apologize.
frankly, I would suggest, since the CIP operates somewhat independently of the budget, I would suggest, and this is only for FY15 or FY16, does anybody think that any construction will be done here over in this next fiscal year, i.e. in the next 16 months? No, 14 months, I can't imagine.
Other
that either.
than probably preliminary engineering.
Preliminary engineering, but that's,
Once you recommend a plan, that will be translated into a,
so would we change the designation from master plan construction to master plan engineering? And then have a separate line item for the out years for the construction? That would be my thought.
yes, sir, I can talk to, I guess the challenge is now, how does that affect the budget that the council's reviewing
It doesn't
next
if you
month?
put it in the out years.
Okay.
So here's what I would suggest.
Okay.
amending this draft chart, and I'm hoping both of you are taking notes on this.
I am, yes, sir.
On the line item under Harover property,
Okay.
my suggestion, somebody stop me when I cross the line, is to change the second line in that category from master plan construction to master plan engineering, leaving the total at 300,000, adding another subline directly below master plan construction, directly below master plan engineering, constructing the new line and making it master plan construction, and putting in a placeholder for FY 17, 18, and 19, $2 million apiece.
$2 million a year?
It's purposely high.
Okay, it's way freaking high, but if that's what you're shooting for,
It's
yeah.
purposely high because of
If
that,
that's
that rendition of the
Okay,
plan.
right, that's it.
And it can be, all we're committing to is the 300,000 for this year's CIP. By the time next year rolls around, I am hoping that 14 months down the road, there is some sort of more defined.
So we gave guidance to our guys today, are they going to use just the 2016?
They're just going to
numbers?
use the 2016 numbers. That's all they
Then
base
that's
it.
fine, if we put it out at $2 million a year, and then adjust appropriately.
So, Mr. Chairman, so right now you already have engineering at 75 in this fiscal year
That's master plan, well.
and 300,000 for construction. Are you saying move the 375 for engineering?
Yeah, that's an even better idea. Just change 75 to 375, because you may actually do actual engineering between now and then, or at least contract the actual engineering between now and July 1 of 16. And then we're set in the CIP for the out years. How much is that most expensive plan? What was the price tag on that? $7 million?
7.25.
No, I don't believe that included the engineering, or maybe it did include, I'll have
No,
to
it
look at
didn't
the
include
chart.
the engineering.
And that was just a swag anyway. I mean, it was a complete swag. It's $7 million,
So we'll
$7
get, so
and a quarter, it's all the same.
So we do $2 million a year for the next 3 years. That allows you to phase the project. If it ever actually gets done, you've got something in there and they can play with the CIP next year.
So 375 for engineering,
Zero for construction
Construction.
in this fiscal year.
Okay.
And then $2 million for the construction each of the next 3 fiscal years,
through 2019.
2019. Is there any objection to that change?
None.
So that doesn't affect our budget, it simply
It doesn't affect the
anticipates
budget.
what we would
It
look
just
at
makes the out
the
years,
subsequent
correct.
budget years, okay?
If anything, it changes the 5-year plan, but I don't think anybody's looked at that.
Well, I mean, the whole intent of this was a long-range plan. If that's a more realistic cost, then we
Yeah.
need to put it in the
Yeah.
CIP.
Let me make my notes.
Ooh, that's a long night.
Okay. Go back to where we were. What was the next item?
Okay,
Council chamber visual enhancements. Okay. I have no idea.
I believe that's changing the, that's the cameras and stuff, isn't it? It's in the write-up, probably. We'll look it up in the write-up.
I thought it had something to do with laptops or iPads or something like that.
That's the technology upgrades.
Well, then that would be better than visual enhancements.
Yes.
If it's technology, visual enhancements makes
It
it
is-
sound
it
like
is-
something
it is-
new.
it is a
We're going
techno-
into semantics now.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, no, it sounds like a paint job as opposed to,
and I think Ralph's actually right on this. I would actually strike the visual enhancements line item and just move that 25,000 down one line and incorporate it into technology updates. It's much more easily defensible as a CIP item. It also gives you more flexibility if indeed it needed to be transferred to something else that could be called technology improvements if something broke or became substandard.
So you went 25,000 moved down to
Move
technology
down one
upgrades.
line and just strike the visual enhancements and incorporate the visual enhancements language in the text. Just move it and make it a subparagraph under technology updates or upgrades.
On which page of the narrative, I'm sorry?
72. It's a little,
No, I got it on 72. Was there
Oh.
language in the narrative that you were referring to?
I would further define it as information technology, not just technology.
It's actually under, it's all lumped together under subsection 6, town administration. So there's actually no change to the language of the text, only to the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I would also recommend naming it information technology upgrades or updates as opposed to technology, because
So
it
would
could
I.
be,
It's,
is very vague.
yeah, I agree.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Rename technology upgrades to information technology upgrades, just so it's within a category instead of more vague and broad.
So do you want to strike visual enhancements altogether?
Strike it entirely and move the $25,000 down.
Okay.
And as a result of doing that, just for consistency's sake for the CIP, I would make that 6,000 in 17. Given that we're going to have to do technology upgrades to other things if these other projects come online, just to put a placeholder in it for the out years, I would go 20, 20, and 20 for the next 3 fiscal years.
So 20 for, strike 6,000, go 20 for 2016, 2017?
And then 18 and 19 as well.
20.
So you're talking about 20,000 a year for 17, 18, 19 for town administration?
Yeah, because if this other stuff gets built, there's going to be necessarily there is going to be a requirement for IT upgrades to handle whatever's being done down there. If for instance, the town decides that they want an active recreation center where you're going to have pay to play, or you're going to have
Computer
some
room or something.
league use or something like that. There's got to be a method to track it. There's got to be software purchases. There's got to be equipment to track it. Similarly, with some of the other stuff that's coming in on the other end of town, it may require that as well. So we might as well plan for it in the CIP and put the money there. And again, it's going to come up next year for their deliberation again. They can move it, strike it, change it, whatever. But at least it gives you a basis point to start from next year where there is no basis point at this point in
Can I
time.
recommend 25, only because?
I have no issue with that.
As long as you're throwing around money like.
I mean, anytime you do any sort of technology addition, I mean, we're talking at least 10, 15K, but as a state buffer, 25K would be more than sufficient to handle any staged implementation.
So is that 25K for 4 years running?
Free.
The six next
6.
year is
Seven.
changed to 25?
It's 25
So it'll be 25 next year.
next year, 25 the year after that, and 25 the year after that. I don't like going more than 3 years out.
Okay.
I
25.
love the concept of 5-year plans, but I don't see them as workable, like smoke and mirrors. So is there any objection to that amendment to the, okay. What do we got? Gateway signs.
That's likely to be 2, not 4, simply because we've got,
But you've got 25 in the next year anyway, so
Yep.
you're fine.
because the bridge and then the west end of town.
Police cruiser, why don't I see it?
Under police department?
Oh, there it is.
So quiet zone, real quick, quiet zone implementation sign I just put in there, and that is identified as could be more costly for equipment upgrades in the footnote. So,
Well, for quiet zone, we can't begin the quiet zone construction until after the Linton Hall corridor
is open.
is done. I don't see that being finished. I don't see us incurring any expense on that until at least the next fiscal year.
Okay.
So I would put, if you're gonna add the quiet zone in, I would do, quiet zone engineering, and I would simply put a placeholder of 50,000 for FY17. And then to cover any preliminary grading or anything that would be done, I would put another 100,000 in for quiet zone construction in 17 as a separate line item, and then a second, just in case it's more expensive than we thought, 250,000 in FY18, and when that can be changed depending on what the what the actual figures are. Once the process begins, they can change it in CIP in the out years.
Let me send that back to you. So the quiet zone implementation signage line item, we're going to change that to quiet zone engineering? Is that what you're suggesting?
I don't even see that.
Under quiet zone, it says quiet zone implementation / signage.
Yeah, I would just make it quiet zone implementation.
Okay.
And yeah, okay, in order to save time and quit being verbose, just strike the word signage,
Okay.
put 150 in FY17
Okay.
and 250 in FY18.
Okay.
Has no impact on this year's budget because none of the numbers change.
And what all exactly is entailed in that quiet zone?
If my recollection is correct, and it's been a while since I dumped this project on then Councilman Cole, in order to do it, there are several pieces of equipment that have to be purchased along the line in terms of signals for the trains themselves, signage.
There's visual, in other words, if you're not going to have the bell whistle,
Right.
you need to have, I think they widen a little bit widen the crossings, provide signage, electrical crossbars, there's an innumerable things you have to do to offset the audio warnings.
The really expensive part of it is our understanding that the crossing equipment on Jefferson Street does not meet the standards for the quiet zone from a safety standpoint, so they will have to be replaced. And I think the quote at the time was $250,000 to replace them.
That's what I remember.
And that's all town expense?
Well, it's the town that's requesting the quiet zone, so
VDOT may cover the cost. There are grants available and that sort of thing. But from a CIP standpoint, that doesn't matter because we're not identifying the source, at least not immediately.
Right.
We just have to have it in here as a cost thing. We do not, as I recall, have to replace the crossing apparatus on 15 because that was sufficient and won't be an issue anyway because VDOT's going to redo that crossing as a result of the reconstruction, and thus we'll have to put in what is acceptable.
So we have three crossings, Jefferson Street 15 and the private access easement
We're
behind.
not talking about the private access.
Self-storage. So I think self-storage is they're responsible for.
Yep.
It would be, so it sounds like Jefferson would be the priority. But again, you'd have to
Upgrade the equipment.
upgrade it because you're getting rid of the audio signal, you're doing these other things, so.
It's got to do, I remember it had a lot to do with, how long the crossbars are, how difficult is it to circumvent the crossing gates if they're down.
And part of it too is you've got to pay Norfolk Southern to do it. They don't allow that to be subcontracted, so they somewhat drive the rates of cost of installation. So it's a little bit of a monopoly, but that's what can drive up the
I'm
cost.
just saying, if you're going to come up with this cost, you got to know who's doing the work, and you've got to know, I don't know, I just think throwing just money without some.
Well, the money is derived from previous, I don't think this council has talked about it very much. In fact, I know they haven't. But there are still people, a lot of people in town. I think Mr. Passanello actually knows quite a bit about this as well. But the costs, the long-term costs of what it's going to cost the town, either through direct funding or grants or VDOT reimbursement, whatever the source of the actual funds is to pay for them. The cost is somewhat firmed up and has been for 6 years. It's been going on that long.
No, that's right, because
Cole
was doing it,
Yeah,
and
I
then Cole left, came
I
back and continued doing it.
No. I dumped it on John Cole at the beginning of his last term. And that was 2 years, and then he was off, so that's 2 more years. And then was 5, it's okay, 5, it's going on 5 years, yeah. But you're asking about what the actual costs are. At that point in time, it was the the costs that were ascribed to it were a minimum of $250,000, which is why I'm cranking it up to $350,000, at least, if not more, because I'm factoring in both inflation and the engineering costs rising, and I think the equipment has become significantly more expensive.
250 is a number I remember estimated at the time. I think Brian had put 100 in here because we anticipated some matching funds, either through VDOT or some other.
Yeah, that's not the way you do a CIP. You do the whole cost.
Correct.
Yeah,
So that's where, that's not a fictitious number, that has some basis in
All
it.
I'm saying is if these numbers were derived 5 years ago,
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
that's
the
why I was saying
technology
increase it by
could have changed
100,000.
what was permissible 5 years ago. We don't even know if it's permissible today. I mean, it could be a whole new set of regulations for these quiet zones.
We've also had 2 accidents, so.
Right.
I mean, it's mostly for the equipment. The equipment in and of itself, at least as far as the quiet zone goes, hasn't changed. They still have those sensors that you've got to put up there, and all it is a crossing gate with yeah, I mean, that technology hasn't advanced very much.
I think it's an
But
accurate
still,
number to put in the CIP.
yeah, that's why I've pumped it up above and beyond 250. What was the final number for the 2 years?
Final number 2 years right now was 50 and 50 for
No,
100.
for what I suggested to change. 150 and
You had
250?
150 in 2016, 2017, and 250 for 2017, 2018.
That should accommodate the increases. And I think the engineering cost was understated 5 years ago.
A lot of it had to do with timing, so probably next year is when that's actually going to be realized, and that time we'll get the better numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's been delayed largely because the Linton Hall intersection has taken significantly longer than they thought it was going to take, and that's what's been holding it back. But the base numbers probably have not changed dramatically, but from a CIP standpoint, regardless of where the funding is, I'd like to be safe.
Okay.
So, is there any objection to that amendment?
Nope.
All right. Put my reading glasses back on, 'cause I'm
Now we
blind.
jump down to Police Department, which I apologize, I'd forgotten that these were incorporated. So except for the event lights and the enclosed trailer, the other items would be right around the dollar amount that Darren had recommended for policy.
I'm fine with that. Anybody else?
I know one of the issues that they've had are things like the body armor, which needs to be replaced. I think it's every 3 years.
You are correct, but I don't know
They
what the
also
cost
had
of that is.
taser charges. I mean, there's some things like that are relatively lower cost, but they're still in there, and I don't know if you want to.
The problem is, how do we budget them?
Yeah.
Since, and this was the issue I brought up at the budget hearing, how do you pass a budget when your CIP hasn't been adopted yet? I suspect we're boxed into a corner on that. I mean, I would love to put it in there, but at this point in time,
Too late.
well, no. It's actually not, so long as we don't change the baseline to the budget by more than 1%, in terms of, and even that doesn't apply because that's simply on 1% of either revenues, additional revenues or lesser revenues. It doesn't really constitute it doesn't really have anything to do with internal changes within a budget. They can amend it, the town council can amend that as they please internally, even post hearing. They can literally change any line item in the budget they want right now. If it is the Planning Commission's consensus that for some reason the PD requires body armor and it needs to be budgeted this year, or tasers or other what would be classified as capital costs, it is certainly within our purview to add it in. It is certainly within the purview of the town council to strike it out or amend the budget internally to accommodate those proposed costs. From a public safety standpoint, I'm with you. I just don't know. I mean, I don't have a copy of the budget handy. I've got one. I probably got one on my tablet. I just don't know what's been allocated for equipment.
I know some of the officers have their own, some are, I know that.
That's an insurance issue and one that they have been told not to do.
But I'm just telling you what the chief informed us of. And then, like body cameras, that's a big thing now.
They have them already, don't
Well, I
they?
guess it goes back
Some
to,
of them have their own. They don't have them per.
The town purchased body cameras for each one of them.
I guess it goes back to what Darren was talking about earlier, which is with the CIP, do you want to establish a threshold, those dollar amounts more or dollar amounts less?
They're
as
not,
part of
those aren't, those individual items are not going to meet the threshold, no.
No, but if you put it on something like personnel equipment, which if you lump body armor, body cameras, taser rounds,
Personnel safety equipment,
et
something like
cetera,
that.
right, and then, allocate money that way, that might work.
I guess it goes back to,
It's too late this year, I think, is the
well,
problem.
two things. You're developing a proffer policy, but a lot of those, to be candid with you, the application of the proffer policy is going to be pretty minimal given the land we have left. So the point that we keep those items in the proffer policy or in the CIP for the purposes of a proffer policy
Are
you probably-
non-existent.
No, you want to put them where they need to be most appropriate. I think for the CIP, it was those larger
Yeah.
items versus the,
I tell you what, why don't we just revisit that next year?
okay?
And like I say, next year, perhaps the CIP will be done before the budget is published. That's just wishful thinking. All right. Museum, why is landscaping in here? That's an operational expense.
I do not have an answer for you. The
And-
42,000,
I'm looking at the
Yeah,
landscaping,
5K, yeah.
landscaping improvements, that's maintenance, that's nothing more. That's an operational cost, and at $5,000, why is it even in the CIP?
we also had a enclosed trailer in the CIP and the police thing above.
That's not this year.
And neither is this one. 5,000 is next year.
I
giving you a
I
hard
have a
time.
problem, I have a problem with what I view as typical maintenance costs being added to a CIP, and I think I've said this each of the last 14 years. I guess
There has
every
been,
single town manager ignores me.
So the last time we had monies from Alexander's Keep for the museum, she had to come in and say, I need showcases, I need these types of things. So
Yeah.
to me, that would be more of a,
That's a capital improvement,
that is a capital
not
improvement,
replacing
so-
the azalea out front.
Okay, so nice as
So
that.
I would, I understand. So I would suggest striking
Okay.
landscape improvements if there's no objection.
Okay.
None.
No objections, fine, strike. Caboose renovations, 42,000, that's partially covered by a grant,
Yes, sir, that's funded with the VDOT enhancement funds, and
And
that's
it's been on-
currently awarded.
and it's been,
Oh, it is?
and it's been on the CIP for the last 3 years as a current item. Is it actually going to get done?
It did. I think the last time they put it out to bid, no one bid on it. And so Brian has contacted the Public Works Department through Prince William County, who may be able to do the work under the contract with the county.
Is this footnoted here as to the,
Yes, E, funded with VDOT enhancement funds.
Yeah.
So we have the money, it's a matter of who's going to do the work.
there is an existing general fund obligation to fund the difference between the VDOT grant and the construction cost built into this current year's budget.
Okay, well, then I'll have to.
So as an
I'm not-
appropriated amount, that should be footnoted that amount is already reserved from this year's collections to pay for it. And I'd like the footnote to read that way.
So footnote E on the right,
No,
Funded with-
I'd like the text under the museum aspect to reflect that.
so caboose
Fund-
renovations.
To be funded with, let's see. In the upcoming fiscal year, we'll update it.
Oh, the narrative, you're talking about the narrative.
That's what I'm saying, the narrative.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the table.
Construct a deck structure will go from our future to interpret it. The VDOT will utilize a VDOT enhancement grant and FY15 allocations to construct a deck structure that will go from the rear museum exit to the caboose.
Okay.
Any objections to that amendment? Any further suggested amendments, changes, striking?
Does the rear deck section also include all of the ADHD stuff? Or-
ADA,
88,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
that's all of that.
Okay.
That's all of that.
VDOT mandates that.
Okay. In that case,
Might be right at this time of night.
I will entertain a motion
Motion to adjourn?
to
I'm kidding.
adopt the FY 2016 capital improvement plans as amended, May 11th, 2016.
As amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, the ADHD threw me off.
You're ready to go.
I'm sorry.
I'm getting ADHD at this point.
Motion to adjourn?
No,
What?
no, no. Comp plan, we're going to skip, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, next one. This is an information item. Council has given us a task to consider, where is it?
5 plots.
To consider 5 plots and an amendment to the town comp plan. This is an information item. We have no timeline on this. There is no statutory express timeline on this, I do not believe, because it's simply a recommendation.
I want to say in the
For
motion,
amendment.
I think in the directive, there was a return with a recommendation.
But I don't think that's statutorily mandated. But anyway, 120 days is fine. What I would like to do with this, so that everybody is operating from a full set of facts, here's what I'd like. I want this scheduled as an agenda item for the next meeting, and I hate to do this to you, Marchant, but I'm going to do it to you. I want...
I'm going to pass it on to Jen, so it'd be nice.
That's okay. Let me look at the calendar.
Could we work it into the same work session?
No. Marchant, what I would like is for you to forward to every planning commissioner by June 1 and make publicly available through the website or a notice on the website that it's available in town hall. Plats for the 5 affected properties, a rough calculation of the usable square footage of each plat after the setbacks, buffers, and easements are taken into account, and you may have to do a matrix on that, depending on whether you want, I'm assuming you're going to want to consider both, you're going to want to consider several commercial zoning categories for it? Or is that,
No, I mean, I would just, all those things are going to be limited by parking, so
what I'm saying is,
I can establish building envelopes
No, that's
based
what I-
on
that's what I
avenue
was like.
buffers, but that would be without parking, so.
I just, okay, then I'm going to make it even more difficult. I want a building envelope, and I want gross available square footage that's available to put that building envelope in, less the you know what I'm asking for. How much property is taken up by setbacks, buffer requirements given the adjoining existing uses, presuming a zero lot line between the rezoned, potentially rezoned properties. But, the back buffer, the setbacks from the road.
So you want a zero lot line between like planned properties and then 25-foot setback to the
Whatever it is
residential.
to the residential properties or that. I would also like, and this is where you're going to have to get Jen involved, I want the documentation on the historical process regarding these specific properties to include public hearing testimony from the last comp plan revision, and any applications, if there are any, for rezoning by, let's see, it would be Mr. Watts, Mr. Rafferty,
Why by person, why not by lot?
because they haven't changed since the town zoning ordinance came into effect. And I cannot remember the woman's last name who owns the other 2 parcels.
Pardo.
Ms. Pardo.
Is
Or
one of her-
any contract purchaser that has come before the town. I would also like any relevant comments from the last comp plan survey and any relevant comments from the testimony regarding the most recent application for the funeral home that was being considered across from St. Paul Drive?
What are the 5 plots, just out of curiosity? Why are we going down to Pardo?
I'm sorry?
Because they're included in it. I don't know why. I don't know why.
Well, no, they're zoned commercial, and this part of the Madison Street on the corner is zoned B1. The one behind it, the blue house, was rezoned.
Who's asking for that?
What's
Is
that?
Ms. Pardo asking?
No, it's
for that?
already rezoned B1.
Yeah, the blue house that's abandoned, that's currently commercial.
I know that.
Yeah.
That's why I don't, but that's what this request is for, is for those 5
So
parcels.
in 1996, those properties were planned, not zoned, planned commercial. With the 08 plan, the discussion was to plan those for residential, given the
Thank you for
proximity.
reminding me, there's one other part. I know you're going to hate me for this. You also need to find the historical references from the approval and shortly thereafter of the Haymarket Station rezoning. And the reason that the town's development strategy was changed in 2005, and I believe the council minutes and records will indicate a shift to a town plan that was commercial, intense commercial at the west end, diminishing towards the town center, and then going to strictly residential from the town center to the eastern boundary as a result of the Haymarket Station rezoning and as a reason for the acceptance of the Haymarket Station rezoning. And I want all of those records so that everybody has a complete history of what we're dealing with here, because this is not a 1 or a 2-year issue. This is a 15 to 20-year issue, and you need to take everything into consideration. And I'm sorry for doing this to you. And you look duly angry at me, but that's okay.
No, I'm not angry at all, I'm just tired.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we'll get the information together. Jennifer will help me and get the chronology that's done. I guess once we get that information to you, what's that?
I want a detailed chronology.
Okay, I mean, that's what the commission wants.
Give it to Jen. Yeah, Jen can do it.
And Marchant,
Yeah.
and as far as the town boundaries, I know it's nitpicking, but can you update that too? I keep seeing half of the,
Oh, these QBE things.
It's got to be done. as
Which
part-
map
it's
are you
gotta be
looking
done
at?
as the-
what's that?
It's got to be done as part of the comp plan anyway, so. Those are expensive to
It
reproduce.
doesn't show.
No, that's the planned land use from '08.
Yeah.
Yeah, the current zoning map is correct, but yes, we'll have that changed.
What 5 parcels?
Excuse me.
Between St. Paul's Drive and Madison Street. Basically from Madison Court all the way down to A.C. Watts' house. Or Madison
What
Street.
side of the street am I on?
North or south?
Okay, there's Green Hill. Okay. That one, that one, that one, that one, and that one.
These 5.
You're serious.
Yeah, I'm serious. You, okay. Anything else? Okay. 1 mile notices, none. Hope?
Nope.
I got no questions this month. Town planner update, I'm assuming you have none?
Other than to say, you'll see some work being done on the Winterham house. They're putting a significant amount of money in there. They're extending water and power and stuff like that. So hopefully, when they get a warm lead shell, we'll get a tenant in there. So you did ask last month for kind of a cheat sheet or summary. I have that for you. Developments we have going on. There's
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Man with a plan.
She asked for that.
Wonderful.
Oh, well. I didn't like that one anyway. No. Oh, that's one of mine.
It was.
We just happen to use the same pen there. That's not yours.
That's okay.
Very nice.
But you're welcome to have it.
That's all right.
Documents I've done before, so this is the monthly update to do for the council, and this is just a more recent map that corresponds to where all that's.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Chick-fil-A did come, I did visit with Chick-fil-A again, they're anticipating amending basically the pad site behind Fauquier Bank to accommodate a different layout on the property.
So they're back.
Way.
Correct, they're back.
Okay.
And then,
That'll make a lot of people happy.
And then Fairgrounds, Mr. Gravitt was here tonight. He represents their interest. The last discussion we had, they dropped from 150 townhouse units to 87 units. They're looking at marketing a grocer on the property next to Fauquier Bank, and then doing some sort of hotel pad site behind it, and then doing commercial along Washington Street, so.
Did he envision what kind of grocery would be over there?
I'm told it's a cross between a Trader Joe's and a Wegmans, kind of a European grocer where you buy your groceries on a weekly basis. So apparently they set up shop around Walmarts, but they're not expected to have a direct impact with Food Lion. So,
Different client.
and the name escapes me. Yeah.
All right. In that case, I'll entertain a motion.
To adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Obviously unanimous.
You were so good at that.